Jimmy Fallon was complimenting Leslie Bibb on how radiant she looked when something in her expression suddenly crumbled. The actress, who had been laughing and charming the audience moments before, went quiet and looked down at her hands. "Jimmy," she said softly, her voice trembling, "this face isn't mine anymore." The Tonight Show studio, which had been filled with warmth and laughter, fell into confused silence. Leslie's comment hung in the air like a riddle that nobody understood. Jimmy's smile faded as he realized this wasn't a joke or a clever quip. This was something much deeper and more painful. It was November 8th, and Leslie had come on the show to promote her new HBO series. The interview had been going beautifully, full of the wit and charm that had made her a beloved character actress. But when Jimmy mentioned how she seemed to age backwards in Hollywood, something inside her finally broke. "I've had so much work done, I don't recognize myself in the mirror anymore," Leslie continued, tears beginning to form in her eyes. 25 Botox injections, 8 different types of fillers, 3 nose jobs. Her voice was clinical, like she was reading from a medical chart that belonged to someone else. The studio fell into complete shock. Jimmy's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, confusion, and growing concern. The audience seemed stunned into silence, unsure how to process this unexpected revelation from the usually upbeat actress. "Leslie," Jimmy said gently, his voice full of compassion. "Why?" The simple question carried the weight of genuine confusion and care. "You've always been beautiful." "Have I?" Leslie asked, her voice breaking. "Because I never felt beautiful enough for this town." She gestured vaguely around the studio, encompassing the entertainment industry that had shaped her self-perception for decades. "When I moved to Hollywood 20 years ago, I thought I was pretty," Leslie continued, her voice growing stronger with painful honesty. "But every audition, every callback, every meeting, someone had something to say about my nose, my lips, my cheekbones." The accumulated weight of years of criticism was evident in her voice. "At first, it was just a little Botox," she explained, wiping her eyes with the tissue a production assistant had quietly provided. "Just to smooth out some lines." Her laugh was bitter and sad. "But once you start, it's like an addiction you can't control." Jimmy leaned forward in his chair, his entire focus on Leslie. "When did you realize it had become a problem?" he asked gently, understanding that she needed to tell this story completely. The usual rhythms of television were forgotten. This was simply 2 people sharing an incredibly difficult moment. "When my own mother didn't recognize me at Christmas dinner last year," Leslie said, the pain evident in her voice. "She looked at me across the table and asked, 'What did you do to your face, honey?' The memory was clearly devastating for her to relive. But I couldn't stop," Leslie continued, her voice taking on the desperate tone of someone explaining an addiction. "Because in my mind, I still wasn't good enough." She looked directly into the camera. "I still saw every flaw that casting directors had pointed out over the years." The audience was completely silent now, many people openly emotional as they witnessed this raw confession. This wasn't an actress giving an interview anymore. This was a woman sharing her deepest insecurities and self-destructive behaviors with the world. The cameras captured every emotion crossing her surgically altered face. "How many procedures total?" Jimmy asked softly, though he seemed almost afraid to hear the answer. Leslie took a shaky breath before responding. "In 10 years, probably close to 50 different procedures." 50? Jimmy repeated, the number clearly shocking him. Leslie nodded, her composure finally beginning to completely crack. "Botox every 4 months. Fillers every 6 months, surgical procedures whenever I could afford the downtime." "What does Sam think about all this?" Jimmy asked, referring to Leslie's partner, actor Sam Rockwell. Leslie's expression grew even more pained. "He's tried to be supportive, but I can see the worry in his eyes," she admitted. "He fell in love with a different face." Jimmy made a decision that would define this moment. He stood up from behind his desk and walked over to sit in the chair next to Leslie, abandoning the traditional interview setup. "Leslie, look at me," he said gently. "What do you see when you look in the mirror now? A stranger, Leslie replied without hesitation. Someone who's trying so hard to be young and perfect that she's lost who she actually is. She looked at Jimmy with tears streaming down her cheeks. I see someone who's terrified of aging, terrified of becoming irrelevant. But aging is natural, Jimmy said softly. It's human. Leslie nodded, understanding intellectually what she couldn't accept emotionally. I know that here, she said, pointing to her head. But not here, she added, pointing to her heart. Behind the scenes, producers were grappling with how to handle this unprecedented confession. This wasn't scripted entertainment. This was a real person having a breakdown about body dysmorphia and surgical addiction on live television, but they recognized the importance of letting Leslie tell her story. When was the last time you had work done? Jimmy asked carefully. Leslie looked down at her hands before answering. 2 weeks ago, she admitted. Lip fillers that I immediately regretted. What made you decide to talk about this tonight? Jimmy prompted, understanding that this confession was clearly spontaneous and unplanned. Leslie considered the question carefully before answering. Because I'm scared I'm going to die, she said simply. Not from the procedures themselves, though that's a risk. She paused, gathering courage to continue. But I'm scared I'm going to lose everything that actually matters while chasing something that doesn't exist. The raw honesty in her voice was devastating. Jimmy reached over and gently placed his hand on her arm. What do you mean? He asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. I'm so focused on how I look that I'm missing how I live. Leslie explained. I spend more time in doctors' offices than I do with the people I love. She wiped her eyes again. Sam and I haven't taken a vacation in 2 years, because I've always got some procedure scheduled. Have you talked to anyone about this? Jimmy asked, meaning professional help. Leslie shook her head. I was too ashamed, she admitted. How do you tell a therapist that you're addicted to changing your face? The audience was transfixed by Leslie's vulnerability. Many were thinking of their own struggles with self-image, their own battles with aging in a youth-obsessed culture. Her confession was creating a space for shared understanding about the impossible standards placed on women in entertainment. What would you say to other women who might be going through something similar? Jimmy asked, recognizing that Leslie's words could reach millions of people dealing with similar pressures. Leslie looked directly into the camera before answering. That we're not alone in feeling like we're never enough, she said firmly. But maybe the problem isn't with us. Her voice carried growing conviction. Maybe the problem is with a system that tells women their value decreases with every wrinkle. I want to get help, Leslie continued, her voice growing stronger. I want to learn to love my actual face, not this version I've created trying to stay young forever. She looked at Jimmy with determination. I want to remember what I looked like before I started trying to be someone else. What would help you do that? Jimmy asked gently. Leslie thought for a moment before answering. Therapy, definitely, she said. And probably staying away from mirrors for a while, as crazy as that sounds. It doesn't sound crazy, Jimmy assured her. It sounds like self-care. He paused thoughtfully. What do you think your teenage self would say if she could see you now? Leslie considered this question seriously. She'd probably ask why I thought she wasn't pretty enough to grow old gracefully, she said, fresh tears forming. She'd wonder when I decided that natural aging was something to fight instead of something to accept. Your teenage self was right, Jimmy said, with conviction. You were beautiful then. You're beautiful now, and you'll be beautiful when you're 90. Leslie laughed through her tears, the first genuine laughter she'd shown all evening. How do you know? She asked, her voice carrying a note of hope. Jimmy smiled warmly. Because beauty isn't about perfect features or smooth skin, he said. It's about being authentically yourself. And that person is beautiful at any age. The audience began to applaud, but it wasn't typical entertainment applause. This was support, recognition, and love all rolled into one overwhelming sound. Many people were crying, moved by Leslie's courage and Jimmy's compassion. Do you think you'll have any more procedures? Jimmy asked. Leslie was quiet for a long moment. clearly thinking seriously about her answer. "I want to say no," she said finally, "but I know it's going to be a process, like any addiction." "What's your first step?" Jimmy prompted gently. Leslie looked directly into the camera again. "Finding a therapist who specializes in body dysmorphia," she said. "And maybe finding the courage to look at old photos of myself and remember what I actually looked like." They talked for a few more minutes about self-acceptance, about the pressure on women in Hollywood, and about the importance of mental health support. Leslie was more genuine and vulnerable than she'd ever been in public, her famous persona replaced by raw humanity. When the interview ended, something remarkable happened. Instead of rushing off to her next commitment, Leslie stayed on stage, talking with audience members who approached her with their own stories about plastic surgery and self-image issues. The studio became an impromptu support group. "I never expected this response," Leslie told Jimmy as they watched people sharing their stories around them. "I thought everyone would judge me for being so vain." Jimmy shook his head. "They see someone who's human, someone who's struggled with the same pressures they face." The episode aired exactly as it happened, with no editing to minimize Leslie's vulnerability, or make it more palatable for television. The response was immediate and overwhelming, with body positivity organizations praising her honesty about surgical addiction. Within hours, natural beauty was trending on social media, with thousands of women sharing photos of themselves without filters or makeup. Plastic surgeons reported patients canceling procedures. Therapy appointments for body dysmorphia increased dramatically. Leslie had accidentally started a movement. Other actresses began reaching out privately, thanking Leslie for giving them permission to be honest about their own struggles with surgical enhancement. Some shared their own stories publicly for the first time. The culture of silence around plastic surgery addiction began to crack open. 3 months later, Leslie returned to The Tonight Show. She looked different, not because of any procedures, but because of the confidence and peace in her expression. "How are you doing?" was Jimmy's first question, asked with genuine care. "I'm learning to be okay with my actual face," Leslie replied, and her smile was radiant. "Some days are better than others, but I'm getting there." Her honesty about the ongoing struggle was refreshing and realistic. Leslie had used the months since her revelation to become an advocate for natural aging and body acceptance. She'd found a therapist, joined a support group, and started speaking publicly about the dangers of surgical addiction. Her foundation had begun funding research into body dysmorphia treatment. "Any regrets about that night?" Jimmy asked. Leslie shook her head without hesitation. "None," she said firmly. "It was the scariest thing I've ever done, but also the most liberating." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had chosen authenticity over artificial perfection. "I realized I had a choice," Leslie explained. "I could keep trying to be surgically perfect, or I could learn to be beautifully human." Her transformation from someone hiding behind procedures to someone advocating for natural beauty had been remarkable to witness. The Tonight Show partnered with body positivity organizations directly because of Leslie's appearance. They featured regular segments on self-acceptance, natural aging, and the dangers of surgical addiction, always with the message that real beauty comes from authenticity, not procedures. Jimmy learned something profound that November night that changed how he complimented guests thereafter. "I realized that telling someone they look young isn't always a compliment," he reflected later. "Sometimes it reinforces the idea that aging is something to be ashamed of." Leslie Bibb's plastic surgery confession became more than a viral moment. It became a cultural conversation about the impossible standards placed on women, particularly in entertainment, and the dangerous lengths some go to meet those standards. Her vulnerability gave millions of women permission to age naturally and embrace their authentic selves. The ripple effects continued for years. Plastic surgery regulations became stricter. Mental health resources for body dysmorphia saw increased funding. Countless women found the courage to cancel procedures and seek therapy instead. One moment of authentic confession had created waves of acceptance and healing. Years later, Leslie would say that admitting her surgical addiction on live television was one of the most important things she'd ever done. That night, I stopped trying to be a perfect version of someone else and started being an authentic version of myself, she reflected, and that person was beautiful all along. The lesson of that extraordinary November night was simple yet profound. Sometimes our deepest insecurities can become our greatest gifts to others when we're brave enough to share them. Sometimes the most beautiful thing we can do is embrace the face we were born to grow old with. In a world obsessed with youth and perfection, Leslie Bibb reminded everyone watching that real beauty comes from accepting ourselves as we are, not from trying to become someone we think we should be. Her surgical scars became symbols of a journey towards self-acceptance, proving that our wounds can become our wisdom when we're willing to share them with others.